Hello, and it is Kathy Frey here from IMCO, from the International Integrative Maternity Healthcare Organisation, and welcome to this week's Maternity Natural Health webinar. And we are very pleased this week to have the lovely Jennifer Jeffcoat. Say hello, Jennifer.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm honored.
It is great to have you here, and we got such an interesting topic today that Jennifer's going to be going over, with the title being "Your Body is the Vessel to an Embodied Pregnancy, Birth and Postpartum Journey," and she's going to be particularly talking about what she talks as the 7 spiritual developmental layers, which are going to be fascinating. We're talking about trust, fear, pleasure, guilt, empowerment, shame, love, grief, truth, lies, vision, illusions, secure attachment and avoidance, ambivalence, and disorganized, I should say, attachment. So for those of you who may not have had a chance to read the full blurb about Jennifer, she has got a whole lot of little letters after her name, which I'm going to get her to go through and explain her background to you. But her main sort of focus is about that whole preconception to family dynamics. And her works are interwoven with pre and perinatal birth psychology, neurosorometer, I'm going to get you to do it, and reflex integration, craniosacral therapy, mindfulness, and conscious studies. And certainly, Jennifer, there's a real common theme I think we all find as those involved in the maternity world, is that so often with a first pregnancy, women are not always as engaged in that spiritual realm. There's sort of if we think of ourselves as triadic beings, body, mind, spirit, where they're, not necessarily taking that religiously, but taking that as your sort of essence of who you are. But often they tend to, in that first pregnancy, be very engaged in the body and some in the mind, and not always very much in the spirit. And then after they have that birth experience, it's so transformative, isn't it, for so many women? And they just go, oh my God, there's so much more to this. And often they find themselves a lot more engaged in those second and subsequent pregnancies. But I think that we all would dearly love them to want to get a little bit more engaged from the very get-go, and from even before conceiving, in that triadic sort of realm. But just to, before I hand over to Jennifer, the format today is basically that she's going to be presenting about a half-hour presentation with a PowerPoint, and then at the end we'll be doing a Q&A session. If you have any questions, please do put them into the Q&A little button, which is usually at the bottom of your screen. And also, if you're a regular here, you'll know that we would love to also have you put a message into the chat section to let us know whereabouts you are in the world and what your role may be as a health professional, or maybe you're a mum expecting a baby, maybe you're both. So welcome, Jennifer, and let me hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Kathy. Let me go ahead and start my share and all this. And how is it looking, Kathy?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay.
Right. So please do start with a bigger history about who you are.
About who I am. I feel what I need as a layer of support right now in this moment is just to take a moment and do a Mother Earth, Father Sky, just kind of orienting my body to where I am and to where I'm going. So if we can just take a moment and just close your eyes and find that space within yourself and that core, that being, that heart, and bringing your attention to your feet. And as you bring your attention to your feet, feeling the Mother Earth and seeing a light as it moves up the center of your body, all the way to the crown of your head, and orienting to Father Sky, and realizing we have a full front body, all the way from the top of our head to the tips of our toes, and bringing awareness and connection to Sister Moon, and moving back into that heart center and into our back body, feeling Brother Sun's warmth and giving thanks and feeling the energies and connection, and moving back into center body and over into right body, bringing awareness and connection to all sentient life, the animals, the grass, the plants, the minerals, and moving back into heart center, into left body. And as we move into left body, bringing awareness and connection to that greater cosmos, to that beautiful, expansive space. And now, whenever you're ready, just take that nice big inhale and exhale. Ooh, and just orient to where you are. Well, welcome again, Kathy. Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here. Again, my name is Jennifer, and I'm a somatic therapist that specializes in pre and perinatal birth psychology and the 7 developmental layers, the 7 spiritual developmental layers. And just a tad bit about my story. My storyline is, I'm human, and I have 2 children, a granddaughter, and it was truly the birth of my daughter who really moved me into asking deeper questions why. And it led me through anthroposophy, becoming a Waldorf teacher, which led into embryology studies, and really took this beautiful journey, this ebb and organic flow, into pre and perinatal birth psychology, cranial, and just seeing this ever evolving ecosystem that is our body, our beautiful vessel, and how it has been here as a resource to educate us in the way we move, the way we are in relationship, and the way we are within ourselves. And, this really moved me into the birth community, and sitting with over 400 births as a midwife assist, as a doula, postpartum. It just, these babies and these births just really showed me that our spirit, we come into the world with this beautiful essence, this blueprint of these 7 spiritual pathways that are meant to be our guides, but because of social cultural norms, modern lifestyles, those gifts, those guides that are so innate within us, have the imprinting is covering us like a veil. And through the somatic works, you move deep into the realm of where those guides are. And we're going to talk about those today. So again, thank you so much for having me. And we'll start with our rhythm and move forward. Today, what we're going to explore is the vessel. And when I'm using the word vessel, it is our body. We come into this world first as spirit. Our spirit moves into that body realm with our organs. And these 7 spiritual pathways, these developmental blueprints, come with that. And from the womb outward are our resourcing and tools of how to set boundaries, how to be safe within our bodies. And then we're going to move into a little bit of how does our body communicate through our parasympathetic, through our sympathetic, and through our social nervous system. And I know most of you are very aware, especially in the alternative realm, of the polyvagal theory. So with the polyvagal theory, it just again gives another layer of really understanding these storylines and how they can support moving into pregnancy, being present with birth, and being present in that postpartum period and with our children moving forward. There we go. So, what are these 7 spiritual pathways? What are these blueprints? So, when we come in and we begin dividing, and we're in utero in the embryonic state, this beautiful blueprint and the soma, the egoic, and the transpersonal layers are there. They're laid there for us to be able to be our guides, to be able to assist us to have and to move in the world how it was meant to be, feeling safe, having pleasure, moving with our will, and moving in love, being able to speak our truth, and being able to really see clearly our vision, and truly being able to have secure attachment without having to give up that authentic part of ourselves. So for the sake of this talk today, we're going to start with that outward movement of birth, and we're going to look at how can these layers really support the parents, the mothers, through pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. So if we look at the physical identity, knowing that we are sentient beings, and that the sentient being, which as the mother inside the womb of our grandma, of our mother, was already laying that foundation and educating that physical identity with trust and fear. And with that trust and fear, depending on the mother's environment, the social cultural norms at the time, was the imprinting, the education that first spiritual developmental layer was receiving. Was it one that the mother felt safe? She felt like she had choice? Or was it one that was very unknown? There wasn't a lot of support. And so that blueprint that we come in with begins to be imprinted with the signals from the mother coming in. And again, this is to no fault, but just knowing that also she is just feeling into her own imprints that move into the child in the womb. And then we move into that emotional. So this whole first developmental layer of first we are spirit, then body, and emotions then move in. And with the emotions is, how are we able, or what space were we given to be able to express, to feel? Was there the support for the mother to support the child when the child needed something from this 6 months to 2 years? This is where we start to really move the body with excitement. We start to roll. Was there the comfort, when we cried, to just have that space held? And the mother also, with her embodiment, be able to be in her body with her emotions. It's this realm, these two realms of body and emotion, as we grow and move into becoming a parent, is where are we able to sit within our body with our emotion in safety. And we move from that 6 months realm to that 2 years. So that whole time, this is where we really learn to evolve the relationship with guilt. Guilt, again, just like fear, is there specifically to be a guide. It's not for us to live in. It's not for us to be in this low level fear state as becoming, thinking about becoming pregnant, being in pregnancy, thinking about our birth. The same goes with guilt. This imprinting of guilt is truly there to be of one that is a guide. And when we start to feel that guilt, it's truly a resource. And this begins from that 6 month to that 2 years. And so us as moms, when we're pregnant or trying to conceive in our birth process, and we're moving through so much guilt, the imprints have clouded our ability to have this functional, healthy relationship with guilt. And then we do more of a reactive response in making choices or feeling like we don't have choices. And then we have that deepening imprint within ourselves of beliefs about ourselves. And then we move into that egoic realm. And I know those of you who have children can really understand this stage of egoic and how it unfolds and being able to be with it. It really starts to evolve this blueprint that is there again to be the guide of shame. Again, shame is something that's just meant to be the dynamic creative opposition, to be pushed up against, to say that there's something somewhere our needs are not being met. And this is that whole evolvement stage between that 18 months to 4 years. And, where we really started to learn our self-identification, who am I? Who am I becoming? And this is, again, a future reflection and how we become parents or how we hold space as doulas, and understanding that when we're reacting in those moments, it is that dysregulated relationship with shame. And as we, continue to move and evolve, the fifth spiritual developmental layer is that social identity and our relationship with love and grief. And it moves into that realm of self-acceptance. Again, these imprints, and we talk about, that self-love. But if we weren't given the understanding of what grief was really, the blueprint was really there for, we end up moving in grief on a daily basis, grieving about our time, grieving about our choices, and it affects all layers of our lives. And that evolvement is from that 4 to 7 years. So you can see everything has this beautiful, expansive space, and it takes time for these lessons, and evolvement with these relationships with fear and guilt and shame. And then we move into that creative identity, and that is our relationship with truth and lies. And I know so many of us feel that we speak our truth, but I feel when we do step back and take a pause, how many times have we said, sure, that's okay. Oh, no worries. And in reflection, we weren't speaking our truth because our lower developmental layers, again, that relationship with these trust and fear, pleasure and guilt, empowerment, shame, have so many dysregulations and fragmentations as it moves upwards for us to be able to speak as a mother, as a, as a pregnant mother, even as a father, as a doula, as a birth worker. We're not able to move past the imprints to be able to move into speaking truth. And then we move into that adolescent phase. And this is that whole realm of evolvement of seeing clear vision versus illusions that we have to put like a veil in front of us, and being able to move through the world, being able to really honor ourselves, being able to step out into the world. And then we move into the transpersonal, is that, is moving into that higher self and feeling and knowing who we are versus asking the question, who am I? Who am I as a, as a woman? Who am I as an adult? Who am I as a mother? Who am I as a birth worker? Is really, we have this innate knowing because we've had this beautiful template that has been given to us. And the person, our environment that we were surrounded by, always also understood this beautiful template and was able to guide us through all this education and understanding the relationship with fear, guilt, shame, grief, lies, illusions, and that disorganized or ambivalent attachment that we tend to move with in the world. So again, how does this show itself? How do we understand when these parts of us are speaking to us in present moment? Because again, this all moves from implicit memory, all the way from the womb to the first 12 months, on to the 6 to 12 months, to the 18 months to 4 years, the 4 years to 7, on to adolescence and adulthood. And these cycles are beautiful, cyclatory. It's like an ecosystem. It's just constantly evolving based off of our experiences. And those experiences need it be joy, happiness, excitement, or ones of shock, trauma, grief. They all are part of our storyline. And that storyline is held in the body. Our body, it has this amazing, beautiful voice. And how it speaks is through our sympathetic, through our parasympathetic, and through our social nervous system. And again, this is just an overview of our autonomic nervous system, but it's looking at it through the eyes of the guide that it is. These 3 beautiful branches, again, are those signals that come up through the body when we're having a moment that speak before we think. But because of our culture, because of the technocracy, this linear, industrial, modernized world, we tend to go straight to the neocortex versus listening first to what the body is saying. And so with all of those developmental layers, our autonomic nervous system was downloading. When I cried, did my mother come to me? When I reached out because I was so excited to touch that outlet, but for my mother scared me, scared her very much. So she popped my hand and I pulled it away, not understanding what that was all about. These imprints of sadness, fear, start to unfold, and they mount on top of the blueprint. The essence of who we are is always here, but our environment starts to lay these imprints. And so our blueprint gets very clouded, and we begin to move from a very reactive place as we grow. And I can give a quick example is I always kind of use the one if you're walking onto a baseball field, and all of a sudden the ball comes flying and hits you in the head. And, there's that first, the trauma of the ball hitting you. Then there's the shock waves that run through you. And the beauty of the body is the trauma is that alert state, and the shock waves is all that chemical imprinting and letting your body know, need it be, you go into the parasympathetic, you run out of the ballpark, or you go into your parasympathetic and you just freeze and not knowing how to move. So the next time you go on the baseball field, one, you may not be able to because the education that your body received in that moment of the ball hitting either froze, so you go the second time, you're not able to go back onto the field. Or if you do walk onto the field, as soon as you see another ball flying, you run. And what a beautiful gift, because that educated based off of your environment, that your body educated your system to know how to move if you have that experience again. And so this is where the deeper layers of understanding the spiritual depths, we also have primary movements that are also encompassing in a continuum of the spiritual developmental layers, and how the body communicates through the parasympathetic and the sympathetic. And those of us who understand that we actually have a third layer of our nervous system, which is called the social nervous system. And this works is, Stephen Porges' work, the polyvagal theory, and his work is absolutely incredible, and needs to be, primary conversation when it comes to sitting with mothers who are pregnant, preconception, sitting with family dynamics during the birthing process. When we can educate from this perspective, not only do birth workers, but the parents begin to start to understand their behavioral storylines. And the freedom that comes with that is so profound. They start to realize that they no longer have to be controlled by these perceived life threats that absolutely served a purpose, as a little one, or going through a birth process where, maybe there was an emergency, or just maybe that little one had a traumatic experience, even though the mother may have, her story was one of joy and pleasure, but the baby had one that was not. We all have our own storylines. And so by educating and reestablishing and rebuilding these relationships on the 7 spiritual developmental layers, and then understanding how our body is communicating to us, we can move more than in the social realm and bringing forward those beautiful blueprints that were meant to be our guides, moving more into that authentic way of being within ourselves as the pregnant being, as the caretaker, as the birthing mother, as the doula, as the midwife. We will not, we'll have a tendency of lessening that reactive behavior and really moving into a responsive way of being present and holding space. and we begin to move with ease in the world. We begin to trust. And I think the most beautiful thing is we feel so much freedom and choice. And we move again more from that body felt sense before we move from the head space. And how we do that is we move through Ray Castellino's work. I'm not sure if anyone knows Ray Castellino. He, recently passed, but his work and understanding what it means to truly hold space when it comes to pregnancy, when it comes to birth, when it comes to that postpartum, and again, preconception. The more we can understand about our body storylines, the more that we can see all of these double binds. And double binds are false beliefs that we have formed about ourselves from those perceived life threats from the womb, during the birth process. The beauty is that we can unwind all of the shock that causes this reactive behavior, that causes us to feel really restricted, not able to make choice. And we simply learn how to ground, settle, orient, name what it is, and be able to model that. What would it look like if we were moving out of that double bind? And how do we resource? And again, be able to look at our sequencing. Where are we in our storylines with the relationships of fear, guilt, shame, truth, all the way through? And then be able to differentiate what is actually happening in the moment versus the past. And how do we co-regulate with self in our child from the womb, our child in those early postpartum times, to be able to be, because where our nervous system is educating our baby's nervous system and understand sensation, pacing, and tempo. And then moving in, what does it mean to reach out for extra layers of support? And then being able to reflect on the process without judgment on ourselves, and understanding every moment, every experience is truly, we're doing the best we can in that moment. The more we get to understand about our body storylines, the more freedom we begin to have. So Kathy, I feel I'm complete with my part.
That is wonderful. It's been fascinating listening through when you're talking about these layers, the 7 spiritual pathway of developmental layers. And I think that all of us, particularly as parents, maybe those timelines that you're talking about are so obvious in the children. It's great to categorize them, I guess. And and also what's so interesting, I find, is that that whole, from conception to that end of that first year for the baby, they're obviously in that very somatic experience of self-preservation, which is overlapping with their mother's experience in adulthood of that transpersonal self-knowledge. So, it's realizing, I guess, or appreciating that, both of the beings in the dyad are on their own journeys. It's not like you as a mum are fully evolved and your baby is the only one evolving and growing. But could we go back to even to the basics of what does somatic mean, and maybe let you dive a little bit more into that polyvagal theory? That would be great.
Okay, So somatic systema is body. And again, with body, it all of our experiences, have been stored within the body. And if we look at it from, I think kind of how I shared with the baseball, that storyline is held through chemical signals that tells us the next time we see a ball, what we will do. And it's, again, it's not conscious. It's a very unconscious response. And this is why so many times when, especially in those early moments with these little ones and being and breastfeeding and the pace and the tempo, we get so much fear and anxiety because our own storylines that have been held are starting to speak to us. And instead of being afraid of what's coming forward, it's just being able to say, I hear you. Tell me more and let me know what your needs are. And so it's being.
I love that line particularly when you say, tell me more. There's going right back into the old Men from Mars, Woman from Venus book, which goes back a few years. And in there, it talks about one of the best things a man can ever say to a woman is, tell me more. And it's one of our, absolute kind of core things. I guess that's so often where gal pals can often fill that space a little bit with their tell me more. And talking about, their whole prenatal, perinatal birth psychology and how that trauma and shock does affect how it can affect pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. I mean, we do have women here who watch our webinars who are pregnant themselves and not health professionals. But of course, most of our audience are maternity health professionals. And I think that we work so hard, particularly, the ones that are birth practitioners, where if there's one thing as a birth practitioner, that is that the veil is very thin in the birth room between the spirit world or the ethereal world, however you want to call it, and the real world, if somebody wants to give it that name. But whether it's the birth of life or the passing of death, when you're in a room in those two environments, the veil is very thin, and you feel it. And I think that as birth practitioners, we're very consciously aware that that there's a potential for trauma, and not wanting our women to become traumatized. So I guess what some of the hints and tips that you would give birth practitioners and maternity health professionals as to how things they can be doing that can help our women in that pre and perinatal birth psychology sort of aspect?
So it would be coming of one with us really understanding our story, and understanding when we're holding that space. Are we in a hyper or a hypo state? Are we actually in our social nervous system to be able to be fully present? Because what the tendency that tends to happen is that maybe we're in a hyper state because we're seeing something unfolding in front of us, or maybe we're not liking what we're seeing. And so we become activated as a practitioner. And with that comes that energy, comes that reactive behavior from that implicit of our own memory. And we may project that in the room, again, not meaning to, but the projection would be there. And then the mother's nervous system, the practitioner's nervous system, now we're both heightened.
Yeah.
And so,
And I think everybody involved with birth is totally witnessed that situation, or felt like you know that you've contributed to it. And so often you can be in a place where there's a fantastic vibe going on in the room. Everything is just wonderful. And then one person will walk in and that whole vibe can change. It might be the mother-in-law, it might be a doctor, but but somebody comes in with their own trauma, I guess, is probably their own concerns, their own worries, and instantly it can really impact in that environment. And I guess that's where we come back to your term, or the term of holding space, which you might want to explain a little bit more on.
Sure. Just as I move through all of the steps, when we can really understand what it means to hold space for our own nervous system, for our, autonomic nervous system, really understanding the storyline and being able to be in that functional range. And when we begin to go outside of that functional range into the sympathetic or hyper heightened state, or into the hypo and freeze state, we actually understand our storyline so much that we're able to come back into that functional environment by utilizing the grounding, the settling, the orienting, naming, modeling, resourcing, sequencing, and differentiating between where I am and where the laboring person is, or where the baby is, and allow that person to then start to co-regulate off of us, because we are in our social nervous system.
And what about some, could you expand on that, particularly, let's say, in the labour and birthing room, is there some practical tips that you want to share with the birth practitioners, that are ways that they know that they can help themselves and help their woman and the woman's family at that time? Because if there's one thing predictable with birth, it's that it's not predictable.
Yes. I feel, some of the easiest is really just being able to, when you feel that reaction, is being able, one, for yourself, is just take that pause. If you see the mother getting into that reactive state, need it be, she looks like she's frozen, it's just bringing awareness to it. I see you're freezing, or the body is not wanting to move. What, tell me more about that. And so the story will start to come. And then we move through those 7 spiritual layers is, okay, what is the fear? Is there any guilt you're feeling? It's that relationship. We start to move up, and then they get to start expressing and letting out, because those are the shock waves, right? We have the trauma, which is the initial event, right?
Absolutely.
And it's the trauma that is that constant loop of reacting and reacting and reacting. So we can assist, ourselves, but, anyone in the room, when we can look at it from that perspective of just slowing the pace down, taking that pause and letting them come back into their body with those intense emotions, we can start to repattern in that moment and start to release those shock waves, so there can be just a little bit more of embodiment closer to their blueprint in that moment.
I love it. Yeah. And as you say, just taking the pause, just a pause, to even do a really, a good inhalation and exhalation. And because particularly for the birth practitioners, there's so much huge responsibility that you're dealing with 2 lives. And you do need to tell yourself to just actually breathe. sometimes, and take that pause, as you say, rather than the reaction straight away. Just hold it just for a moment, to take the pause, big breath out, and now you've got grounding yourself, isn't it? And I really enjoyed your intro there, with your talking about the, being grounded to Mother Earth, and connected to Father Sky, and aware of Sister Moon. And it's when you do meditate daily, it is one of those things that you can fairly quickly, if you feel like you've become disconnected, you can very quickly get yourself reconnected, and because how it feels to be connected. And I guess that's what we're talking about as well, isn't it? Is really that taking a pause, and just really having the whole universe, back supporting you in your role, so that you can support the woman in their role.
Beautiful. The intelligence out there is just, infinite, and it's all around us. It's just, again, it's not the norm, right? But it can become the norm. And, there's just so much wisdom around us, and so much wisdom within inside us, and then when taking that pause, another layer is being able to orient, oh, I'm not back whenever this happened, this reaction, the shock. I'm actually here in this laboring room. I'm safe. My baby's safe. Even as a birth worker, I'm safe. There's nothing happening to me. I'm just holding space. So that orienting is so imperative, bringing us to the here and now. Yeah.
And I think one of the things that is so dominant within that, within the laboring birthing situation, is that there are things that we all recognize as absolutely normal, and there are things that we know are not normal and are obstetric emergencies. But in between those two, of normal and emergency, there's this whole other area of labor and birth that is at the grey areas, where things are not necessarily, textbook normal, but they're also not, a bells and whistle obstetric emergency. And that is the place where all birth workers, whether you're a midwife or an obstetrician, taking responsibility, we do have to rely on our gut instinct, our intuition, which of course is our connectivity to our own inner wisdom and the universe's wisdom, but we do rely on that a lot. And I think that's probably, if we kind of deep dive into it, that's the part where we can interpret things differently. So a midwife, for example, who finished their qualifications 1 year ago versus a midwife who finished their qualifications 40 years ago may react differently to those grey areas. And it's not to say that one is right and one is wrong. Absolutely not. It's just that we do deal with a lot of grey areas in maternity that aren't, as I say, textbook normal, but they're also not drastically abnormal. And what actually, that word normal, we get a lot. We God, don't we? And is this normal? And I think that, like myself, I happened to be based in New Zealand, and myself and a obstetrician from Australia operate, along with a bunch of other maternity health professionals, a Facebook page called Ask the Maternity Gurus, where we basically volunteer our time with questions. But it's a global place, a global forum, and because there are certainly some countries in the world where the woman it's wise for them to be questioning the advice they're being given. It's, there's different levels of quality of advice, but that word comes through more than any other word, and the questions that come through is, blah, 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 blah is going on. Is this normal? And one of my favorite sayings that I brought the kids up with and is in my books is, normal is a cycle on a washing machine.
Yes. I like that one. I haven't used that one. And again, by understanding our storylines, we get to find out what is normal for us. Everyone gets to start to find what does that mean, because we're not linear beings. We're not we don't move through linear timelines. It's not right, wrong, good, bad. It's looking at the moment that whatever the question is you're sitting with and doing a reflective conversation, even though you're asking it, always putting it back, how is that for you? Tell me more about it. Versus, again, trying to answer it for them. And then we know it, they'll end up evolving the storyline and going, yeah, that feels right. I go, there you go.
Yeah. Gut instinct. Well, we do need to wind it up, but before we go now, because anybody who's registered for this webinar will receive details about how they can contact you. But for those who are not registered, who may be watching us later down the track, do you want to just explain a little bit perhaps about, as we wind up, or anything else that you want to sort of add in there about the PPN somatic therapy support, and how people can get in contact with you?
Sure. I mean, I do 3 trainings. I do a pre and perinatal somatic training. I also do a certification, and I also do an awakened somatic parent education. And then just an awakened somatic certification program, and they're all in person. And how people can get in touch with me is through my website.
Oh, actually, do we want to just I will take you off the share screen. And
take me off the share screen.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or do you want to just click on? There we go. So people can see your full face towards the end. Yeah. So do go over your contact details, please, Jennifer.
So my email address is my first name, Jennifer, my last initial, J, at awakenmethod.com. And if you wanted to reach me by phone, it's 408-891-3751. Or if you'd just like to visit my website, it's awakenmethod.com.
Fantastic. So is there anything else that you'd like to, we basically have sort of covered off the questions that have come through, and so is there anything else that you'd like to finish off with as we come to a close on this session?
Just get to know your body, get to know and trust in its wisdom, and know that we have this beautiful blueprint with everything that I shared of those 7 spiritual developmental layers that is really there to be our guide, and we're meant to live in joy and pleasure and freedom, truly not how we're moving in the world today. And we just need to reconnect to that part of us. So even though there are these systems and these realms in place, we still can move really freely and owning our choice in those moments as parents and, as birth workers. So.
Beautiful, well summarized. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for your time today. It's a fantastic thing, all the different amazing specialists that we get to talk to here, and because everybody's found, these are all people who have found their passion, it's their area, that's their thing, and you know, there's just too much to know for everybody to know everything, and it's just wonderful what you're doing, and you know, absolutely leading edge, cutting edge of this area where, you know, probably and hopefully, you know, in another couple of decades or less, you know, these sorts of conversations will be not so rare, and, you know, more just a, you know, normal part of, particularly when you're talking about things like the, you know, sympathetic, parasympathetic, and the social. You know, this is like this new kind of conversation, but it will probably become far more commonplace, as we hope, as knowledge evolves and as we all evolve. So thank you very much for your time, super appreciated, and we look, and thank you to those who are here live and those who will be watching the webinar later. And we wish everybody a lovely rest of your week. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye,
Kathy.
everybody.